When we think of Joseph Stalin, we think of a dictator that helped to defeat Hitler during the Second World War, and a leader who oversaw the Soviet Union with brutality, purges and mass executions. Stalin led the Soviet Union for almost 30 years, and during his time consolidated his power through instilling a reign of terror overseen by the NKVD. He had come from a poor peasant family and became one of the most powerful men in the world. He was seen as an icon of communism, and he is considered one of the 20th century's most important people. He had a cult of personality, and was seen as a champion of the working class. However, in 1953, at the age of 74, he passed away. His final years were a big departure from the strength he was seen to exert during World War II, and he in fact went downhill very quickly with regards to his health. Today we look at the painful death of Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Stalin for decades had been seen as a sign of power within the Soviet Union. For example, to instill his dictatorship and to ensure that no one dissented against him, he ordered the NKVD to carry out a number of bloody purges, which resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of his own people. If someone did not like his policies, they were either going to meet their end in an NKVD execution chamber or in the horrific forced labour camps known as the gulags. These methods ensured Stalin had little dissent, and he placed the power to administer such brutality in a few people. Lavrenti Beria was the chief of the NKVD from 1941, and Beria, for example, was responsible for huge purges and massacres, and even during World War II, he organised the Katyn massacre, which resulted in the mass executions of 22,000 Polish officials and officers. Beria was swift in his actions, and expanded the gulags to support Stalin's reign of terror, and to send thousands too after they'd been interrogated. Even towards the end of the Second World War, Stalin's health was beginning to decline. He smoked very heavily, and suffered from a condition linked to the narrowing of the arteries. Preventing this condition is usually done by maintaining a healthy weight, and also by not smoking, neither of which Stalin did. Because of this condition, around the time of the Victory Parade in May 1945, a huge military spectacle to celebrate the might of the Soviet Union defeating Nazi Germany, Stalin had a mild stroke. He had this a month before the parade took place, but he was regarded as well enough to attend the huge celebration, and on top of Lenin's mausoleum, he stood with other dignitaries to watch the proceedings. Stalin, it was said, allegedly intended himself to ride through the parade, but during a rehearsal he fell from his horse, and then handed this responsibility over to General Zhukov to do so. However, in October 1945, he had a rather severe heart attack that was also very serious. It was clear that the dictator was very ill. However, he did manage to live a number of years later following this. He was told by doctors to work less and relax more, and he took longer holidays away from his seat of power. In 1950 and 1951, he took long breaks, even holidaying for 5 months, but he began to look towards his doctors with disdain. He thought they might be involved in a treasonous plot to oust him, and in January 1952, he ordered that one doctor should be imprisoned after they suggested to improve his health and chances of living longer, then he should stand down as dictator altogether and retire. Later, more doctors were arrested, mostly for plotting allegedly to kill senior politicians, but Stalin, still showing his brutal side in his final days, ordered that these men be tortured for information and a confession. From 1946 to the day he died, Stalin's public appearances began to become few and far between, and he only gave 3 public speeches during this time. 2 were very brief, only lasting a couple of minutes. He also wrote less, and seemingly sought to spend the last few years of his life how he wished to do so. His last book was published in 1952, titled Economic Problems of Socialism in the USSR. Near to the end of his life, Stalin spent most of his time at his dacha in Moscow. When he was left on his own, he often became rather depressed and wished for his close friends and inner circle to join him for dinner or to watch a film. Khrushchev later stated, as soon as he woke up, he would ring us, the 4 of us, referring to Georgy Malenkov, Lavrenti Beria and Khrushchev, and either invite us to see a film or start some long conversation about a question that could have been resolved in 2 minutes. He relied on these people, and and it's considered his successor would have been Malenkov. In 1953, he was 73 years old and of very poor health since his heart attack and strokes. He also became rather paranoid, which is why he criticised his own doctors. He also liked to keep his inner circle on their toes, even in his final moments, as it was said. He liked to repeat to us, "You are blind like kittens. Without me, the imperialists will throttle you." On the 28th of February 1953, Stalin summoned a small group of his inner circle, Malenkov, Molotov, Khrushchev, Beria, and a few others, to get together for an evening of films, entertainment and drinking. At around 4 a.m, the guests left, and Stalin then retired to his quarters with instructions that he was not to be disturbed until he had awoken himself. It was said we said goodbye to Stalin and departed. I remember that when we were in the entrance hall, Stalin came out as usual to see us off. He was in a good mood and joked a lot. He waved his index finger or his fist and prodded me in the stomach, calling me Mikola. He always used the Ukrainian form of my name when he was in good spirits. Well, we left in good spirits too, since nothing had happened during the dinner. Those dinners did not always end on a happy note. But time passed, and no sounds were heard throughout the day. At 11 p.m. on the 1st of March, his housekeeper went into his room and found Stalin collapsed on the floor, in a shirt and pyjama trousers. Stalin was on the floor unconscious and had wet himself, and attempts to wake him up failed. In the early morning of the 2nd of March, Beria, accompanied by a number of doctors, examined Stalin, and he was noted to have had high blood pressure, and had become paralysed on his right side of his body. Stalin's history of high blood pressure had led to a stroke, and a very serious one affecting the left middle cerebral artery. He was then transferred over to the dining room sofa and was covered over with a rug. Over the next few days, he was treated by doctors in many different ways to try and decrease his blood pressure. It rose to 210/120, and to help bring this down, he had 8 leeches placed over his face and neck to try and bring his blood pressure down, but things got worse. It was said that the doctors who looked after him were very worried, and they were so worried that they could be accused of trying to kill Stalin. He continued to go downhill, and on the 5th of March 1953, he passed away at 9:50 p.m. He had previously been vomiting blood, and his stomach began to hemorrhage, causing his death. The next day the public were informed that Joseph Stalin had passed away. An autopsy was carried out, and it was said that pathologic examination revealed a large hemorrhage, localised to the area of the subcortical centres of the left cerebral hemisphere. The hemorrhage destroyed important areas of the brain and resulted in irreversible changes in the respiration and circulation. There were found significant hypertrophy of the left ventricle of the heart, numerous hemorrhages in the myocardium, in the stomach and intestinal mucosa, changes in the vessels more prominent in the cerebral arteries. These are the result of hypertension or high blood pressure. The result of these examinations revealed the irreversible character of Joseph Stalin's disease from the moment of brain hemorrhage. Therefore, all treatment attempts could not have led to a favourable outcome and prevent a fatal end. It was also said of Stalin's death that the death agony was terrible. He literally choked to death as we watched. There was suspicion of foul play, especially relating to the conduct of Lavrenti Beria. It was noted that he said, "I took him out," but he did stall medical treatment reaching Stalin. However, the autopsy confirmed that the symptoms and problems experienced by him in his final moments were consistent with that of other stroke victims. It was even alleged that Stalin had been poisoned, but this is completely speculation. It's believed he could have possibly been spiked with a blood thinner that affected his stomach, causing the hemorrhaging. However, Beria, if he did manage to kill Stalin, within months he was executed himself. On the 6th of March 1953, Stalin's body was put on display inside the Hall of Columns in the House of the Unions, and it stayed here for 3 days. His body on the 9th of March was then taken to Red Square before it was interred in Lenin's mausoleum, where it lay in state until 1961. After the coffin was brought to the mausoleum, speeches were given by Molotov, Malenkov, Beria and Khrushchev, and his body was interred there with a national minute of silence. The bells of the Kremlin Tower chimed, and sirens and horns played, as a 21-gun salute was fired inside the Kremlin. As the public attempted to pay their respects, many people were crushed by a crowd rush and they were trampled to death. It's been estimated that 109 people died inside of the crush, but this could have been more, and even in the thousands. The death of Joseph Stalin signalled the end of one of the most important figures in the 20th century. He was a man who rose to the very top inside of the Soviet Union, and swathes of the population loved their dictator. He was a man who defeated Hitler, but in his final moments, he was a shadow of his former self. It's clear that his death had been brought on by years of unhealthy lifestyle, and that his high blood pressure led to his fatal stroke. He had been ill for a while, and for years, with his final years in office being dominated by longer periods of rest and holiday. He still remains one of the most captivating figures in world history. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.